Welcome to Beacon of Creation, a weekly podcast on game design through the lens of Magic the Gathering. I'm Tim.
And I'm Marcus, also known as Mark Confidant.
We got you on the pod for a kind of important one. This is one of our Design League Finals episodes.
Yeah.
Neither you nor I have looked at these cards.
Yeah, we're going in pretty darn blind here, and it is pretty high-stakes business. These are the culminations of some pretty serious effort on the part of Brad and Prov.
We had all the qualifiers. We had a whole bunch of challenges where anyone could enter. We cut to a top 8 or top 9, sort of. We got that down to a top 6, top 4, and now the last 2. So these people have designed a lot of cards to be here, and also a lot of cards for this specific challenge, which was they had to design a whole standard deck. There's a couple pieces to it, but if you think like a standard, like capital S standard, like Magic standard, these are going to be cards from a couple different hypothetical sets that don't exist. So part of this challenge is, can you convey that these cards came from a couple different sets? They've also got kind of a prescribed colors and theme to the deck. The deck name is supposed to be Jund Builderbear. So, a lot of these decks have kind of funky names to them. Jund Builderbear. Deck colors, because it's Jund, black, red, and green. And then it should be artifact, sacrifice, mid-range. What kind of things would you imagine for that kind of deck?
I would imagine something that's in the zip code of being sort of aristocracy, maybe with things that have like kicker style mechanics that give you a reward for either jumping through the hoop of having a sacrifice this turn or having like operant additional mode that comes from doing a sacrifice. I would imagine the production of sacrificable tokens is a pretty reasonable assumption, but these are all kind of just prescriptive assumptions that I have as a first pass. I don't think that if someone deviated from them, they'd necessarily be wrong. Like if you said to yourself, okay, this is artifact mid-range, but I don't think I'm going to use treasure in this because I think it might be blasé. I think that'd be a totally reasonable way to go about the challenge.
Yeah. We're thinking, maybe treasure tokens, other junky tokens that are easy to sacrifice, or non-tokens that like are okay to sacrifice because they're giving you value some other way, or it's easy to get them back from your graveyard.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can kind of unearth them temporarily and then sacrifice them, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I could imagine that craft edict artifact that sees some play in Pauper is, to my mind, an example of like the archetypical sacrificable artifact where you're doing a thing and then you get a payoff if you really want to sacrifice it to use it for something else.
Yeah, craft would be a good example from like Lost Caverns, where there's a bunch of artifacts that usually do something when they enter, and then they themselves can upgrade into a new cooler artifact by, sacrificing things or eating your graveyard, or they've already gotten their value. They can be sacrificed to something else to power up something else, and you're also happy there.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because they have their own default mode, but then they reward lateral thinking by letting you use them as, kind of fruit to go in the blender and make your Jund smoothie.
Yeah. And another thing, it's maybe a little harder to do in a standard context, but when we say like Jund, like that even maybe also evokes another component that we might see. Like the classic Jund deck is maybe more of a modern thing than standard. But it's sort of saying like cards that are just like independently strong and that any combination of them will be enough to get you over the finish line and win a game. Like planeswalkers or things with Cascade or other ways to like make sure that each of your cards kind of stand alone and you combine in nice ways. I can fill my graveyard. Oh, that powers up this Tarmogoyf or something.
Exactly. And also things that trade very consistently one for one, and then other things that spiral the game a little bit out of control. So, for example, a hand hate effect that leaves it so that your opponent is likely to be empty-handed, kind of locked in a dank and musky room with your Tarmogoyf or your Death Shadow is an example of what people think of when they think of a Jundi-style deck.
Yeah. There were some other kind of constraints on the construction of this deck. So it's a 60-card constructed deck, but it's not 60 unique cards or whatever. It's actually only going to be 13 unique cards. 5 of those cards are going to be 4-ofs. So there's going to be 4 copies in the deck. 4 of those cards are going to be 3-ofs. We're going to have 1 2-of, 2 1-ofs, and a land that you would have probably 4 copies of. If you made an actual standard deck, you would have other lands besides basic lands in there. We're kind of shortcutting and not worrying about that for this exercise, for this challenge. We're just saying, hey, give us just one of the lands. Give us a new land for this deck. Probably a dual land or something like that. Some sort of fixing to go with your 3-color deck here.
And when it comes to critique, it's probably not going to be something where we say, oh, you constructed this deck that is, because this is a 24 land deck nominally.
Yeah.
If we were to say, oh, this looks like it'd be more of a 22 land deck, that seems like it's probably not the most realistic criticism.
Yeah.
I think a certain amount of grain of salt of being like, well, this is what the deck list skeleton looks like, and the mana base might be slightly different, or while they presented this as a 3 of, I could see the argument for it as a 4 of.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's the sort of thing that we're going to be too terribly nitpicky about.
Nah.
There's also this question of, is Builder-Bear going to be a 4 of? Is it something where maybe they shaved the 4th Builder-Bear once they realized that the deck needed to be constructed a certain way? We'll see.
Yeah, and it's also a little bit of a flavor challenge. What set are you? What conceptual set are you placing Builder-Bear on? Brad had his own solution for it. If you heard it in the last episode, but we'll see what Provocative here with their submission got up to. So we're going to start here with you're allowed to give some sort of blurb, some sort of explanation of the deck, up to 250 words. We're going to read that whole thing here.
This is a tournament report for John Builder-Bear. Just so everybody knows, I'm going to be listing the set names after I read off card names when I do this deck tech. The main card of the deck is Builder-Bear from Cirque to Terre. Landing it on turn 2 and keeping it around quickly snowballs the game by turning incubate cards from Phyrexia in the Void into stat monsters. Zotual Sentinel from Zotan Rise and Fall, and Thief Guild Runner from Caves of Ulto are cheap generators of fodder. Builder-Bear proved extremely potent against other mid-range decks by going wide with bears and Unbound Sation from Akiyama Pass, while other decks failed to go tall, such as Atarka 5-color midrange.
I like that.
The other half of the deck revolves around Zotan Sun Scion of Zotan Rise and Fall. The card is a potent reanimator piece for small threats, and if it ever flips, it becomes a card advantage engine. Cards like Phyrexian Core Render from Phyrexia in the Void, and Melbourne Ronin from Akiyama Future also pay off this game plan very well. These grindy engines eviscerated decks like Mono Red Unluckiest Curses aggro, who typically ran out of steam under the flurry of removal. The removal package is wide and fitted to the meta. Death with the Dawn from Zotan Rise and Fall, and Nwakta Arbiter from Zotan Rise and Fall are catch-alls in a very wide meta, while Drag Light into the Void from Akiyama Past is an allowance for Azorius Control's hexproof threat of choice, Archon of Seagate. After conquering Azorius Control in the finals of GP Buenos Aires, Build-A-Bear is well positioned to be the Scourge of 2027.
This is very fun. I was having a good time while you were reading that. Not just like all the made-up sets. We got Cirque de Terre, we got Phyrexia in the Void, a couple other ones in here, but we also have the other decks that they beat. Unluckiest Curses aggro and Blue-White's Hexproof Threat of Choice, Archon of Seagate. I love that we got some card names even from cards that aren't in this deck.
Yeah, it's a good little drop of a hint, and also scans with the sort of things that you could imagine there being. The Unlucky Curse guy that shows up in the art of most every Commander Curse product.
Yeah, you're right.
And, I mean, if Archon of Seagate isn't the name of some, 6 mana, 6/6 hexproof lifelink, cares about drawing cards, does something dumb, can phase out, can give your opponent an atomic wedgie, then I don't know what is.
All right, well, maybe we'll get started here. I'll read the first card. We're going to have 13 of these, so this is going to be the bulk of this episode. Our first one here is the land. Actually, we're starting off with the land. Mayakama Silverpool. It's a legendary land at Mythic. It has tap to add colorless, 1 in tap to add 1 mana of any color, and 2 in tap, copy target triggered ability of an artifact you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. And the flavor here, the waters pulse madly with a promise. Sum that up for us. What are we trying to do with this?
Presumably we're trying to get some sort of value out of the third ability here.
Yeah.
Because the first 2 abilities are just the, Caves of Temptation style. Yeah. I'm going to filter a color. It's almost always a pretty dreadful rate for a land to be tapping down a little bit more in order to fix your colors. You're willing to hold your nose and do it from time to time in limited. In constructed, you feel pretty bad if you have to do it. Presumably, the rate here is almost entirely on, I have a triggered ability that can be a murder on an artifact, and if I'm lucky, I can murder twice.
Yeah. This is a legendary land. It's 2 in tap, so I'm sort of spending 3 mana for this ability. So I kind of need some sort of artifact triggered ability that is good enough to spend 3 mana on to get an extra copy. Like, for example, if it was like, whenever I die, create a treasure token. That's probably not going to be good enough to be worth 3 mana a copy. You know, I'm paying a deck building cost putting this card in my deck. I need something a lot bigger, like when I attack, take an extra combat after this one, or when this enters the battlefield, murder, destroy target creature. Oh, okay, I'll get another copy of that Gear Hulk ability.
Yeah, something that's a good enough rate that being able to pay it off is very feasible, and you feel very rewarded for it.
Yeah, I guess if we're looking at this is closer to that higher mid range end than the lower mid range.
This seems like a grindy release valve, which both it being legendary obviously prompts you pretty heavily for a one of, but then also being the epitome of this game is grinding so hard it's starting to grind the grist clean into dust sort of vibes.
Fair enough.
That mana sink ability is astounding for that. It's not like a manland sort of land, but I don't think a manland would be a one of, where I think this is totally cromulent as a one of.
Yeah. All right, give us our first spell. Our
first spell is a 1-drop, and according to the deck list, it is a 4 of. It is Zotul Sentinel. It's a single red for a 2/1 artifact creature spirit golem. When Zotul Sentinel enters or attacks, discard a card. If you do, create a relay token. It's an artifact with 3. Sacrifice any number of relays. Draw that many cards. The flavor text is, there is no world that will be left unconquered.
Spirit Golem 2/1 for 1. So a little aggressive. When it enters or attacks, discard a card. Not you may discard a card. If you do, create a relay token. And so I can get these pretty readily, but I'm discarding a lot of cards as I do that.
Yeah, you're pitching a bunch.
We need this artifact to be pretty good, I would say, because this Sentinel sort of has a cost like when this enters the battlefield, discard a card and get a token that you could use later. That's a steep price. And then so the relay itself is kind of like a clue, but they all sack at once. Or you can sack as many as you want, which is probably at once.
Yeah, it's a slow clue in terms of cracking one, but as I'm sure you probably know, the worst clue that you can ever have is like your 4th or 5th clue or whatever, where you're like, there's no conceivable world in which I'm sacrificing all of these before we hit turn a billion.
Yeah.
And so this says, oh, I'm sacrificing all of these before we hit turn a billion? No, I guess I'll draw 5 cards. That sounds pretty good.
Yeah. And I guess this is making me think that the sacrifice deck plan for this deck is a little less about creating a bunch of junk and then eating it, but a little bit more about caring about when artifacts are sacrificed. Because this card is not good at producing a bunch of stuff for you to then eat because you're paying whole cards for those relays. But if you just want to make 4 of them, have them all sack at the same time. And every time you sack a permanent, put 2+1/+1 counters, or every time you sack a permanent, draw a card, or every time, something like that. It's much better in that context.
I think there was also in the blurb for this, there was a mention of Reanimator, and this does seem like it's pretty good for Reanimator. You don't mind pitching your thing that you can't feasibly cast before the game ends.
Yeah.
If you're going to be bringing back your thing you can't feasibly cast before the game ends. And if you can use that to draw into the thing that brings it back, then more power to you.
Yeah, I guess I was maybe looking at this starting from the lens of like, hey, it's an aggressive 1-drop. But it's maybe because you're more of a mid-range deck, maybe you're not committed to trying to play this on turn 1 when you maybe want those cards. but it's something a little bit later on where you can get 2 triggers off of it. You can, have it enter and then have it chump attack, and you get 2 relays. Maybe it dies, or maybe you sacrifice the Sentinel itself. And you're content with this card even when it doesn't come down on turn 1.
Yeah. It's interesting because once you already have out a relay, it becomes a lot closer to just rummaging when you use this. So the first time it enters, you're getting a slow clue. But then when you attack with it, you're getting just more draw attached onto your slow clue. Where for clues, your N+1th clue is always worse than the ones prior to it. There's like a point where more relays is just gravy, and where you like the additional value from relays probably drops off once you're getting like a bunch of cards drawn. But improving from a relay that cracks to draw 1 to a relay that cracks to draw 2 is improving from 3 mana cycling, which is pretty horrible, into like a build your own kind of crummy divinate, that's all right.
Yeah. And there'll probably be other ways to make relays that aren't on 1 drop, so. Or maybe not. Maybe this is our only one. Which is kind of the fun part of this challenge, is that we'll see mechanics that only show up on 1 card in this deck, but that we're trying to imagine a world where there are, 10, 15, 20 cards in this hypothetical set that would have this relay token.
Yeah, I wonder what that relay environment would look like. I imagine, and this is probably a bad idea, so, take it with a grain of salt. Hand size matters stuff potentially existing there, where you have a turn where you crack off with the relay, and because of that, you have like 10 cards in hand. But that went poorly enough back in Kamigawa that I feel like it's an act of hubris to suggest it.
All right, our next card here is going to be a sorcery. Drag Light into the Void. That is a metal card name. Drag Light into the Void. It's a single black mana for a sorcery at uncommon. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice an artifact, sacrifice a creature, or pay 1 and a black. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker with the highest mana value among creatures and planeswalkers they control. We've sort of seen the kill spell version of this, like a Bone Splinters or whatever. 1 mana, you have to sack a creature, but you get to kill something. Here you get a lot more flexibility on what you pay to cast it, but it's also not necessarily like a, reach out and kill the thing you want to kill. It has to kill the biggest thing, which is probably, in the running for the thing you want to kill.
This card in the deck list is also a 2 of, so
okay. Yeah.
It's not the most frequent thing, but odds are this is pretty close to being untyped removal. But also, sacrificing an artifact might be a get to rather than a have to. And depending on the environment, sacrificing a creature might be relatively free in some circumstances. If your creature's outclassed, if it doesn't matter to the board at all, you don't mind Bone Splintersing it.
Yeah. This one's a little more of a role player than like a visionary card, except maybe this name here, Drag Light into the Void. Ooh.
Yeah, it's pretty metal. I believe this is from the Kamigawa set. I think it says so in the deck list. Ayakama Past.
Yeah.
Which I think is probably a Kamigawa set just based on the Spirit Gate. There's a Spirit Gate set symbol to these. And
little Torii Gate looking thing, yeah.
So it's probably something, if not Kamigawa adjacent, then at the very least Kamigawa inspired. And it seems like a pretty sweet name and a pretty sweet flavor.
All right, give us a new card.
Our next card is the one, the only Builder Bear.
Dun, 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 dun.
1 and a green for a 2/2. Shocker right there, I know. It's an artifact creature, bear. It has trample. And it has, as an artifact you control enters, you may have it become a 2/2 toy bear in addition to its other types. Whenever another bear you control dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Builder Bear. This is the second time this ability has resolved this turn. Draw a card. Well, there's your payoff.
Yeah, there's our upgrade to the Sentinel. Okay, so when the Sentinel enters, you can discard a card. If you do, create a 2/2 that also has other upside. Okay.
And if it enters after the Builder Bear, the Sentinel itself can be a bear, the relay
Oh
can be a
yeah.
bear, your later relays can also be bears. So you could, for example, swing in with the Sentinel,
Hmm.
expecting it to die in combat,
Hmm.
and sacrifice your relays, turn Builder Bear into a 5/5,
Hmm.
and draw a card. And draw two more.
Whew. This one's definitely delivering on the whole deck is circling around it. I want to play this on 2, then on turn 3 I want to create a bunch of tokens somehow.
In the same sort of vein, it looks like Builder Bear with itself has a little bit of that second pack rat sort of energy, because all your Builder Bears are already bears, so playing a second
Oh
Builder
yeah.
Bear makes it even harder to get rid of a Builder Bear, because you're going to grow the Builder Bear in most
Hmm.
cases
Hmm.
when you're getting rid of it.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of interesting because it doesn't do anything on its own. It's a 2/2 trampler, which is
Mm.
kind of a fun place to be. Like it needs other things to happen, either bears in your deck or, hey, I'll help you make some bears by if you play some artifacts. So maybe it even has a little bit of reach out and play it in some commander decks or something because people want to put that in a bear deck. I'm kind of loving the artifact creature bear as the 2/2 bear because, there's been some talk. Grizzly bears are 2/2. Would they be 2/2 these days? Should bears be 2/2s? Maybe they should be a little bigger. Well, this like somewhat crazy, this like animated evil stuffed bear. That could be 2/2 because that's only going to be 4 feet tall or however tall it was built to be.
Yeah. It reminds me of I don't know if you read the Planeswalkers Guide to Duskmourn, but
Oh,
there's animated spooky toys in that.
oh
So
hell yeah.
this is giving that sort of vibe. I could see Cirque de Terror possibly being a return to Duskmourn, as a
Okay.
pure hypothetical.
Love that. All right. Next up, we've got another 2-drop. This is a card called Thief Guild Runner. Let me check what this was. This was from Caves of Ulto. It's 1 and a red for a 2/1. It's a creature human dragon scout at rare. When Thief Guild Runner enters, create a tapped treasure token. Whenever Thief Guild Runner attacks, if you've plundered this turn, new word, create a 4/4 red dragon creature token that's tapped and attacking. Exile that token at the beginning of the next end step. Oh, okay. So we get a temporary 4/4. You've plundered if 3 or more permanents have entered and or left the battlefield under your control this turn.
Hmm.
So when this attacks, if I've either created 3 things, lost 3 things, or I think some mixture of those, I get to also attack with a 4/4.
Yeah, there's a little bit of ambiguity to that, whether the mixture works. I
Yeah, yeah,
assume so as well, but I'm somewhat critical of this reminder text as a merit of that.
yeah.
This is the first time I feel like there has been any sort of thing that could be, this is a weird way of saying it, but critical of a card as a card. Like prior to this, when we've been talking about things, we've been very much in like the fiction of this tournament deck.
Yeah.
This is the only time thus far that there's been any sort of hiccup to that, which to be clear, I mean is a compliment. Like things
Yeah,
have been
yeah.
very like buttery
Clean.
smooth thus
Yeah,
far.
absolutely. Very plausible cards, yeah.
Yeah. How do you feel about this relative to something like Geist of St. Traff? Do you think this fits better in red?
Yeah, that I guess temporary attacker, if you just say those 2 words. What color is temporary attacker? That is red. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? The Geist of St. Traft version, that's a blue-white card that creates an angel. Um, I guess the flavor there made enough sense. I don't know that it would be a blue-white card in a lot of circumstances, but it's such a classic card that I have a hard time questioning whether it should exist. I don't know.
That's fair. But it has hexproof.
Yeah, it has hexproof. Yeah, this
Yeah.
one's a little more vulnerable. This can get picked off by just about anything.
Yeah, this one dies to a stiff breeze, which is probably a good choice.
Yeah, you always get a treasure. Is sort of your trade-off here.
AKA a bear.
Yeah, it can turn into a bear or care about our enter leave token thing for plundered. So you got a little bit of a bar to get to 3 permanents entered or left. I guess if you have treasure, that makes it really easy. If you're trying to do other tokens or other permanents, it's a decent amount harder.
Yeah.
Plundered lines up with that flavor. Plundered is treasury.
Yeah. If it's a mixture, it's much more doable because the turn after Thief Guild Runner comes in, so the first turn that it could attack, you can probably crack the treasure to double spell if you have 2/2 drops, which is not an inconceivable ask in most decks. Because of that, it seems very feasible to hit for something like 6 with this. So I guess that's one of your kind of more aggressive openers. Overall, the deck has seemed on the mean pretty aggressive, but I guess if we're going in mana curve order, that
we're
makes
going mana
sense.
curve. Yeah.
This is the aggressive half of the mid-range deck that we've seen thus far.
Yeah, this is a fun card. It's a little human stealing an egg from some dragons, so you better run. And the dragons might be chasing you if you've been plundering too much. They might notice you.
And important to note, this is a 4-up in the deck as well.
Oh, okay. So this is a core part of the deck.
Yeah.
There's different set symbols for each of these, like with Bradley's, and I can't tell what this is supposed to be. Can you?
I cannot. It looks like a soccer ball with wings to me, but that's probably incorrect.
I guess maybe if you imagine a jeweled ring that you're looking straight down at, maybe that's what this could be. Yeah.
I was thinking that somehow Caves of Ulto is related to Ixalan. That's probably incorrect, but like the idea of it with that
Thief Guild definitely puts me on the maybe this is sort of like a Delicious in Dungeon World. You know, you've got a town up top, you've got a bunch of treasure down below, and so the caves are all the different things you're investigating.
Yeah, I could see that. I think Delicious in Dungeon has like a D&D influence that I could see if like the slice of life isekai sort of chill time dungeon crawler with like a very gamey sort of like frame to it was something that Magic wanted to kind of crib notes off of. I would not begrudge them at all for having a world that's kind of that scene.
A little optimism, a little, like we're having fun in this world looking through these dungeons. Yeah. Caves of Ulta didn't say that to me when I heard the name. I was a little more on the Lost Caverns, maybe just because that's the set that came out a year ago.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of buying the vision there. Why don't you give us another card?
Our next card is Altar to Perfection. It's 1 and a black for an artifact. It's from Phyrexia in the Void. It has when Altar to Perfection enters, incubate 3. And whenever an artifact creature you control attacks, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life.
Oh, attacks.
Note that that's not 1 or more, so you swing with a whole squad of rocks and you're draining a fair bit.
Yeah, this is kind of a setup card, right? Because I'm paying 2 mana and not getting anything immediate that's going to attack or block. I incubate 3, so for 2 more mana, 4 total mana, I get a 3/3. But it's installment plan, so that's kind of appropriate. And then if this is really saying I want artifact creatures, like that scout, that Thief Guild runner that we had as the last card, that's not a good fit for this altar. Because this is saying when an artifact creature you control attacks, each opponent loses 1 and you gain 1. And like you said, you only have to do that with a couple artifact creatures a couple times and your opponent's dead.
Yeah. Importantly, this is also 2 bears.
Yeah.
One of which is a 5/5 bear, which is Khans of Tarkir bear size.
Yeah. You've got the incubate token, which comes in as a bear. You can pay 2 mana to flip it. Those are counters on the incubate token. So yeah.
You could turn your
Do you even need to flip it?
your 5/5 bear into a 0/0 if you really wanted to. If there's an edge case where you might do that, where if your opponent has something that says like destroy a creature with power 4 or greater, you could turn your 5/5 into a 3/3 in order to dodge removal. If that's relevant in this standard environment, it's very funny. If not, that's trinket text that doesn't really matter, and
it's gonna be Arena's gonna be auto stopping me every turn. Like, don't you want to flip this? You got spare mana? No, I don't want to do that, Arena.
I guess also when it is the backside of it also a bear?
Well, it hasn't left the battlefield, so I think it keeps any traits.
Yeah, it's probably still a bear. So there's not something you can do where you flip it to dodge, like choose a creature type, destroy all creatures type something. Still though, this is quite strong in the context of being played with Builder Bear.
Yeah.
In terms of like making a plant to build around a card, having a lot of incidental artifact rewards through the building of bears is a pretty reasonable thing to do here.
Yeah.
On its own, this card's kind of mid to bad. It's like a artifact creature lord-ish thing, kind of a little, but you would need a lot of artifact creatures to feel pretty rewarded by it, and a 4-mana 3/3 is kind of blasé.
Yeah, yeah. And not as a criticism to the card, but just to kind of like, what is our baseline? Our baseline's a little bit low. Because
Yeah.
like we've already seen creatures that are not artifact creatures in this deck. So it's its ability is not naturally that powerful, but we're seeing, hey, with Builder Bear, hey, maybe if I need an artifact to sacrifice, one of those two things. Now it potentially has a place.
In the same sort of vein, if you're getting into full-on mid-range town, everybody's in top deck mode, it's more important that I get as much efficiency as possible. This plays really well with the silver pool because you're getting 2 3/3s.
Yeah, okay. Scrape and buy kind of stuff, yeah.
It's like, it's not great rate, but they're 2 3/3s that also, and I think I forgot to mention this, they dodge sorcery speed board wipes. So you can just leave the incubators around if you don't have them turned into bears already as an insurance policy in case your opponent just, kills all your stuff.
How about a new card?
Alrighty.
Oh,
Our next
2 cards
card.
in one.
Yeah. Yo, dog, I heard you like cards, so put a card in your card so you can double face your double face cards. And this one is the name of a set. Zotan Rise and Fall is the set name, and this is Zotan Sun's Scion. 1, a black and a red for a legendary creature, Demigod. Whenever Zotan Sun Scion enters, return target artifact or creature card with mana value 2 or less from the graveyard to the battlefield. Then sacrifice a permanent.
Oh.
At the beginning of your second main phase, if you sacrifice 2 or more permanents this turn, you may exile Zotan Sun Scion. If you do, return him to the battlefield transformed under his own control.
Okay, let's take a break and process this, and then we'll get the backside. The backside's a planeswalker and like a fairly normal planeswalker.
This is Renegade Rallier, but without the need to enable it, but with a sacrifice tied to it. So oftentimes you're like grave blinking some jabroni, or you're recurring your Altar to Perfection that you pitched with your Zotuel Sentinel and getting your Incubate token and getting your ability to track an artifact swinging in, and you don't mind that because you sacrifice a land. Or you do this early enough that you still care about your land drops and you just sacrifice the Altar to Perfection and you don't care about keeping track of the drain because losing out on a little bit of damage is worth it for this free Incubate effect.
Yeah. Anything that has like an enters ability is going to be useful for Zotan here. Return target artifact or creature card, mana value 2 or less. So yeah, either a creature or that artifact that we just saw, that Altar to Perfection. At the beginning of your second main phase, so you have to do it either during combat or first main phase. If you sacrifice 2 or more permanents this turn, you may flip them.
Yeah. Seems like the relays make it very feasible to flip this, which makes sense. They're from the same set, so presumably this guy's part of, if relays are in any specific color pair, then red-black cares about relays a fair bit. Maybe there's a red-black sacrifice thing that specifically is red-black sacrifice around relays.
Yeah, so if I have relays they're basically clues, but you sack them all at once.
Yeah.
And that's really good for this. You build up 2 relays, then you can flip Zoltan pretty easily. If you have some clues or something like that, you're in a great shape for this too. You just sacrifice 2 clues to help pay for this guy or whatever, and then you're already doing great.
Your Treasure from the Thief Guild Runner in the same sort of vein gets you there pretty well. There's no real way to sacrifice your incubators, but those do give you a little bit more grist for sacrifice if you are in a good position to sacrifice.
We had that removal spell where several of the potential costs of that removal spell were sacrificing things. So yeah, we've already been set up in the first half of this deck to flip Zotan. Maybe not at will, but when you need to.
I forget, does the legend rule sacrifice things, or is one thing just put into a graveyard as a byproduct of the legend rule?
I don't believe it's a sacrifice, no.
Dang. That would have been useful for this. This is also only a 3 of. I think that makes sense in the context of legends. Probably if one of these is stuffed in your hand, then you're feeling pretty bad. If you've successfully flipped it, then you play the second one and you just kind of
try to not flip.
It's May, so you're in Gravy Town there.
Okay. You may flip it. All right, cool. Well, how about the back half of this card?
You know how I mentioned relays before? I'm going to look pretty clever right now. He Who Devoured the Sun is a legendary planeswalker with the subtype Zotan. So +1 is create a relay token, then you lose 1 life for each relay you control. So you really need to time things precisely in the context of this in Zo12 Sentinel. And the -1 is target player sacrifices a creature with power less than the number of cards in your hand. So again, you really need to time this with Zo12 Sentinel.
you were pitching the hand size matters with these relays.
Yeah. So really, you just want to take a big hit to the face, pop 5 relays, get a full-on Insano mode grip, and then just totally snuff out their biggest, nastiest guy. And then -1, return target artifact or creature card with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, then sacrifice a permanent. So the enter's on the front side.
Oh, yeah.
Its starting loyalty.
I think it's exactly the same.
Yep. Its starting loyalty is 3. You can do any of the minuses pretty continually and keep whittling this down without any worries about really losing out on an ultimate. Yeah. And the plus is on the mean, sometimes a negative effect. So sometimes you're just going to be minusing because minusing is your best option available to you. Sometimes you might even avoid plussing this, kind of similar to Liliana of the Veil, which is a really good place to be in when you're doing a comparison for a Jund card, because I think Liliana of the Veil is in the pantheon of sacred Jund cards that kind of embody what Jundiness is.
Is Liliana one of the cards on the Jundamount playtest card?
Let's find out. I will do a quick Scryfall search.
I got it up here. Yeah, there's a new playtest card, Jundamount, which creates one of 6 cards at random that are famous Jund cards, and one of them is Liliana. I think Pantheon's an appropriate moniker for that.
As they say, when in doubt, Jundamount.
There we go. And yeah, the minus here, compared to Lily, is pretty favorable because it's only a -1. They only sacrifice something with power less than the number of cards in your hand. So if you deplete your hand, it doesn't do anything. But if you can keep your hand kind of healthy, then yeah, you have this really efficient way to whittle down, a board of bigger creatures.
There's tension with that and the Sentinel, as I was mentioning. It's interesting to have that tension, though, because this punishes you for having too many relays and rewards you for having a full grip, whereas the Sentinel whittles down your grip and raises your relay count. The Planeswalker side of this is asking in no uncertain terms that you, at some point, do your Giga Relay.
Yeah, that you get rid of those relay. Because, the +1, you create a relay, then lose 1 life for each relay you control. So the bigger your backlog, the more damage you take. If you can keep them, if you can keep eating them, either because you're paying for them or shoveling them into an oven, you can keep the life loss under control.
It's interesting that we haven't seen an aristocrat yet. The only ways to sacrifice artifacts are organic to those artifacts.
And their removal spell.
Yeah, that's true. And the removal spell. I guess that's a itty-bitty aristocrat.
Yeah, the main mode on Zotan seems to be, if you got nothing better to do, you have Mentor, you have them do the normal enter ability of, graveyard flickering something, or, bringing back a 2-drop and sacking a 1-drop. And then it flips because you sacrificed a couple things that turn, and then just continue doing that each turn for the next couple turns. So you can keep getting flicker value, you can keep making things die, you can keep triggering all your plunders and everything else. And then if you want ways to spend your mana, you can start plussing to get more relay tokens, or you just want more loyalty. And then if you're in trouble, if the board has stuff on it, then you can do the Liliana sacrifice in the middle and, whittle down their board. So you have plans for every occasion with this card.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's maybe one of the showcase cards. It's got two sides, got a lot of text. So let's drop back down to some of our workhorses, one of which is a card called Death with the Dawn. Black-green for an instant at uncommon. And this is from the Zotan set. It has Bargain. Like Wilds of Eldraine, you may sacrifice an artifact, enchantment, or token as you cast the spell. And then the text is, destroy target non-land permanent if its mana value is 3 or less, or if this spell was bargained. For 2 mana, I can destroy a small permanent, or 2 mana and bargain, I can destroy any non-land permanent I want.
And then all the tokens in this are themselves artifacts, so there's no real case where you'd be sacrificing just a regular creature to this.
Yeah, I guess, like the toy bears are artifact creatures, yeah.
Yeah.
It's an instant, unlike the other one, so this is the one that you're keeping up to keep yourself safe from something busted happening. We have two different sets where we really don't like the sun. Drag Light into the Void and Death with the Dawn.
I don't really have a lot to say about this card. I ding it ever so slightly for both it and Drag Light into the Void being kind of the same effect. But, sometimes standard decks maximize the same effect.
Yeah, I mean, they are pretty different in how they function, because, one's a sorcery thing that I'm kind of planning out. I have to time to the right moment, whereas this other one is a 2-color card that I kind of just use whenever I feel like it.
You know what I would bet is that Draglight into the Void is probably for the Azorius deck that was mentioned.
Yeah. In the blurb, it was sort of a pre-sideboard.
Oh yeah, it's explicitly said. While Draglight into the Void is an allowance for blue-white control's hexproof threat of choice, Archon of Seagate. That explains why it's a 2 of, and why the rate on it relative to other stuff is kind of not awesome.
Yeah. All right, our next one here. This one's a creature. Unbound Station. 1 red-green, 3 mana for a 4/4 creature spirit. It has Inspirit, which is in kind of the mutate frame, and it says for a red and a green, so 2 mana. If you cast the spell for its Inspirit cost, put it over target non-creature artifact you own. They merge into the creature on top, plus all the types and abilities from under it. So this is mutate, but only onto artifacts and only on top of artifacts. And then it has an ability, as you might expect. Whenever 1 or more artifact and or spirit creatures you control attack, add that much mana in any combination of red and or green. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. So before you Inspirit, 3 mana 4/4, that when it attacks gets you a mana, and then just goes up from there.
It's somewhat asynergistic with Builder Bear, in that you can't Inspirit the bears, so if you play Builder Bear too early, I guess it's a May ability on Builder Bear, so you can still animate things, but if you top deck this and you've already animated your thing, you can't Inspirit your bear and swing in that turn. You need to find some other way to produce an artifact to Inspirit. That said, it's synergistic with it in that you can gain a bunch of mana. So you can have a bunch of mana with which to pop a relay and copy the relay pop, or with which to, continue your engine going on whatever you still have in hand.
Yeah, this is saying we don't just want one way of animating our artifacts with a Builder Bear. We want a second way of animating our artifacts. We're going to get them so consistently that we want a second one, and that other second one is going to be this Station.
In that context, it's somewhat strange that the Ultimate to Perfection is only a 3 of. I guess this also, though, it's kind of a big ask when you Inspirit it, in that you're Inspiriting a token as a called shot that token, if you care about it, is not going to be removed. So, for example, if you have only like 2 or 3 relays and you animate a relay, losing out on that card when you aren't getting like just a buttload of cards such that you hardly care how many you're getting is painful if it happens. So you kind of want to inspire it in a situation either where they don't have instant speed removal or where they can't remove it without you being able to pop the token, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm. I guess with mutate, so if they destroy the thing out from under the mutate target, you still get the creature, is that right?
That's true, but if you, for example, mutate, you're tapped out and you go to combat trying to swing, they can destroy once it's already resolved.
Yeah. They can't stop you from getting the 4/4, but they can potentially make something a retroactive 2-for-1 because you've committed this artifact. You've championed this artifact.
Yeah.
I still feel like this is a solid deal in a lot of cases. It gets you a lot of heat very fast. Yeah.
The fact that you have a bunch of incidental dummies to suit up is very good.
Yeah.
I'm never going to be sad about inspiriting a relay with this. I'm never going to be too torn up about inspiriting a treasure or a... You probably inspirit the altar more than you inspirit the incubator. You probably only inspirit the incubator if they're tapped out at a guess.
Yeah, if you put this on a treasure, you're kind of just spending the treasure because this would have cost you 3 mana normally, and you can inspirit it for 2.
Yeah, the treasure is becoming haste, I guess.
Yeah, it's actually a little bit up from that. Yeah, just paying.
Also, it's an artifact creature, so like your tracking for that is somewhat rewarded as well.
Yeah, it is kind of funny that this is a creature. When this melds with an artifact, it becomes an artifact creature, sort of.
Yeah.
Or not sort of, literally. And then when you attack with artifact and or spirit creatures, you get a couple mana. In standard, I'm not expecting this to be more than 2 mana or whatever, but it's so nice to have.
I feel like in the bear situation, it could be more than 2 mana.
Okay.
So you turn 1 Zotuel Sentinel, get an incubator that's not animated. Turn 2 Builder Bear, swing with the Sentinel, get an incubator that is a bear. Turn 3 animate this onto the incubator that's not a creature, swing with 4 creatures that are all artifact creatures, add 4 mana. That's the Christmas land on this. That's the perfect curve out.
Yeah, and I guess in standard, 1 or 2 of those things are being killed. That's sort of what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah, I guess I'm goldfishing more than anything else, which is probably not an accurate assessment.
Yeah. Goldfishing can sort of say, could we trigger a thing a bunch of times? But in this case, it's a little bit more, you're getting a little mana back. You can use that mana to crack a clue or whatever, relay. You can use that mana to play your Death with Dawn removal spell. You're getting something, or maybe not quite because the colors aren't right, but you're getting a little bit of mana back.
Sometimes the mana would be right if you had a Black already untapped. So the rebate is worth it overall.
Yeah, the rebate's nice. All right, we only got 4 more. Why don't you give us our next card here?
Our next card is
a creepy looking one.
Perverted Completion. I don't think Wizards would allow you to use the word perverted, but we accept it here, and it's pretty dope.
Fair enough.
Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it or a card from their graveyard. Exile that card. Incubate 3 and flying. So that's create an incubator token with 3+1/+1 counters and a flying counter on it. And 2, transform this artifact. It transforms into a 0/0 Phyrexia artifact creature token.
So kind of like our other incubate card, this is not a rate monster on its own. It's 3 mana to nab a card from their hand, which is kind of a high price. And then you get an incubate token they have to pay some more mana for. But as a total package, you could do a lot worse.
It does remind me of... What is Paulo Vitor D'Amorosa's card that has him on it? Elite Spellbinder.
The 3/1 flyer, yeah.
Yeah. You're losing the ability to have it immediately be there, but you're gaining 2 points of toughness, and they never get to cast the thing. It's a discard spell, one that hits rather late, but is pretty bulletproof. And
in standard, hitting late is less of a cost.
3 is really late for a discard spell, though.
Oh, I agree. I'm just saying it's a little less late than it would be if we're comparing it to other classic discard spells.
Yeah, that's true. I wonder whether this could be, if it was an incubate 2 and flying, if it could be a 2-drop spell.
Yeah.
Because there've been a fair few black creatures that are flyers that hold cards in hand. I wonder whether this would be
Yeah.
Slow enough for making the creature that being like a truly exile discard spell 2 mana would be worth it, but I'm not sure.
I definitely appreciated on the last step when some of Brad's cards you could imagine, hey, we could tighten this down and make this more efficient. But in standard, you don't necessarily always get the tightest, most efficient cards. And I think Provocative is providing the same thing here. Here's a card that fits the deck. It's maybe not the best card you could imagine for that slot, but it's what you got.
That's fair. I do just think 3 is very expensive for this effect, and I don't
Yeah.
know that I've ever seen it. But maybe I'm not thinking of it sufficiently as a creature or as a card for this pretty intensive synergy package that exists.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess if you have Builder Bear and you play this,
Yeah, that's a very good curve.
you get a 5/5 flyer.
Yeah.
How about a
Um,
3 mana 5/5 flyer that ETBs Thought Seizes? Is that a good enough deal for you?
that's a very good deal. I would just be willing to bet most any amount of money in the world that Build-A-Bear is the Bob of this standard environment, and that if it's not dead when they go into turn 3,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're in a very bad position.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Right, that was a fun one. Next up, we've got Nuocta Arbiter, 2 black-green for an artifact creature spirit golem. So this is from that Zotan set. It's a 4/4, 4 mana 4/4 in Golgari. It has trample. When Nuocta Arbiter enters, you may sacrifice another non-land permanent. If you do, exile target non-land permanent opponent controls. Well, there's our super bone splinters there. You may cast cards exiled with Nuocta Arbiter, and you may spend mana of any type to cast them. Oh, we got a hammer here.
Yeah.
Woo.
I do think the card art kind of looks like it has wings in it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does have wings in it.
So, given that, and given what we know about what's permissible in black green, what if instead of having trample, this was a flying vigilance?
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, it's a classic bit. I've got to do it every once in a while.
And it's guaranteed to trigger at least 4 people listening to this podcast who got that question wrong.
All right.
Anyhow, we got 4 mana 4/4 trample. If you've got some bits and bobs around, you get to sacrifice
Which
it.
you do in this deck. Yeah.
Which you do in this deck, yeah. Sacrifice another non-land permanent. If you do, exile target non-land permanent opponent controls. Kind of a vindicatey, just like get out of here kind of thing. And then you sort of draw that card as long as you can keep the Nuocta Sentinel around. The way this is phrased is not like the Gonti effect, where it's all one rules clause.
Mm-hmm.
You may cast cards exiled with Nuocta Arbiter clause that lets you cast things. That's a separate thing. So the Arbiter, this card, has to stick around in future turns for you to cash in those things that you exile.
It's interesting because usually on O-ring E effects, you get the thing back, and that's your upside for killing the O-ring.
Yeah.
On this, the O-ring sticking around is downside, but killing it gives you no upside, if that makes sense. Or it's not really an O-ring, it's already done its Vindicate.
Yeah.
And then there's the downside of the Vindicate can upgrade into successfully having hostage taken something.
Card. Yeah, yeah. This thing's serious.
Yeah.
It's kind of in that fun standard zone where it is answerable. Like, are there going to be like ETB kill a thing type cards, Chupacabra cards? Yeah, we're going to see those sometimes. You have to pay a cost to get the Chupacabra here to get that ETB kill something effect. And this can spiral out of control on its own, but you can also cut off that spiral before it happens if you've got your own removal spell.
This really makes me hope that there's some anti-sacrifice card in the standard environment, just given the sheer rate on this thing. Like a Yisharn, Implacable Earth sort of. Players can't pay life or sacrifice non-land permanents to cast spells.
Something to punish sacrificing, yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Because this is a really strong rate when you do have so much incidental just stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Or even sacrificing like a Zotan. I'm not too torn up about sacrificing like a Zotan to kill something if I'm going to be getting that thing back afterwards, or putting this really intense pressure on my opponent to remove this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And, you pack enough 2-for-1s in one deck that some of them are kind of loose, like the the discard spell we just talked about was kind of expensive. If I'm playing that discard spell, I'm hitting one good card out of their hand. I conveniently leave the 4-drop in their hand.
Yeah.
They play that 4-drop. I saw that coming, you fool. And I Nuocta Arbiter them, exile that thing, give up my Incubate token, but who cares? And then if they can't kill my Arbiter, which I know they can't because I, got rid of their removal spell, I get to cast their cool 4-drop.
Yeah, it's that classic mid-range conundrum of like, I've seen your hand and I've orchestrated a situation where you have 2 top decks before my scary threat screws up the game in this way that really, really, really ruins your day. But like in the sweet Jundi way, not in the like, I'm doing something so profoundly mean and messed up that Magic has ceased to be fun.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, those mid-range decks can be frustrating when like they have all the agency in the world and you're kind of stripped of material and resources.
This Arbiter is the kind of thing that you're playing your goofball standard deck on Arena, and then you play against the deck that has this Arbiter, and you're like, well, they're going to just outgrind me very quickly, and then this game's going to be over, and there's nothing I'm doing about it. This is maybe in the top 2 of cards so far in terms of just like, wow, this is powerful, along with the Builder-Bear for me.
Yeah, I think I agree. I also think the Arbiter feels like a cop. It's very much, this is keeping the format from having such and such thing go on because this thing has a strong rate and it answers trying to keep stuff around or trying to not play removal for stuff.
Yeah.
It also is an astounding top deck with Silverpool. So you're on like...
Oh, yeah. Good check, yeah.
Turn 7, you've made all your land drops. Things are very much in top deck mode. You NBA jam this on a stalled board and... I don't know, let's say it's the Mirror and you steal their Field Runner and their unflipped Zotan or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess we haven't seen, kind of like checking back on that the silver pool that could copy artifact triggered abilities. We haven't really seen ones that we actually really cared that much about copying. Like the cheaper cards, their triggers are not really worth spending 3 mana to copy. So yeah, this Golem is the first one that we'd want to do that with.
Yeah, this is the sort of thing that says, okay, if this is the board state when it's happening, then you're popping off.
Yeah. All right, we got 2 more cards.
This is Nullborn Ronin. 3, a black and a red. For an artifact creature samurai, it's a 4/4 and it has evoke, 1 black or red. You may cast the spell for its evoke cost. If you do, it's sacrificed when it enters. And we do care about sacrifice in this deck. When Nullborn Ronin enters, return up to 3 target artifact and/or creature cards with total mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield.
Nice. 3 target artifact or creature cards with total mana value 3 or less. So a 2 and a 1, or just a 3, or 3 1s.
Or if there were zeros, a fair few zeros.
Yeah. Infinity Ornithopters. We're playing the 100 Ornithopter cube, and we're...
Yeah.
Oh, we only get 3 anyhow. Even if we have zeros, we can only get 3 things.
Okay, yeah. So you could get...
Crushing our dreams,
You could get a bunch of 1-drops, but there's one 1-drop in this deck. So most likely what you're trying to do is get like a Sentinel plus a thing. Although you're not too torn up if you're just reanimating a Builder-Bear. Considering Builder-Bear, the rules text on the card essentially in this deck screams, kill me now. If you don't kill me now, I will drink your salty, salty tears.
Yeah.
Then 3 mana reanimate a Builder-Bear does not feel horrible, even if it's weaker than Zotan.
Yeah, the Sentinel doesn't seem that awesome to bring back. Like when it enters, I get to discard more cards to create relays. Like I'm not playing this Ronin to bring that Sentinel back. So yeah, I guess it's redundant Builder-Bears. It makes sure that I can get more Builder-Bears if I want more Builder-Bears.
Looking at the deck list, this is a 1 of, and I think that makes sense. This is what am I doing with my mana when I am a little bit flooded, and then it has this relief valve of, okay, I don't have the 5 mana. Okay, I'm fine doing this for 3.
Yeah. This is one of the less exciting cards of this pack for me, but it's only a 1 of, so I mean it's got kind of cool art, and I don't know, it doesn't fit this deck that well, but maybe it fits it well enough because Build-A-Bear is just that good.
Yeah. In the context of skewing bigger for some matchups, this also seems like a good relief valve. So I imagine if Gen Builder-Bear is a deck that's been iterated on, perhaps this is something where this vacillates between being like a 1 of and a 3 of, depending on whether you're trying to outsize the other gun builder bears.
All right. And then our last card here is another 1 of, right? The yeah.
Yep.
Is a high drop Phyrexian Core Render. 3 black for a 5/5 mythic. So this better have like a cool ability. Creature Phyrexian Horror. Trample. Whenever you sacrifice an artifact, each opponent sacrifices a creature. That is a mythic. I can confirm. That's a mythic effect. The amount of size this brings out on the EDH table is truly massive.
Yeah. You go dockside into this
Yeah.
and have an asymmetric board wipe, and also every other screwed up thing dockside does.
Yeah. We're sacking artifacts because we have to specifically sacrifice artifacts for this. So that is mainly to relay tokens.
Yep.
We have incubates, but we're not sacrificing the incubates too often. Except when we like just instantly. Yeah, we can't really sacrifice the incubates too much. I guess the Arbiter can sacrifice anything. But like the Zotan effects where we're kind of death flickering things, those don't really work with tokens quite as well. So we're looking at the relay tokens to make this thing work.
In terms of true board wipes, this can be pretty good with the relay tokens, but even just incidentally, doubling like a Death with the Dawn is pretty good. So you like Death with the Dawn if they have an enchantment or something like that, and you're removing that, and then you're also removing their creature. I know there was the Curse aggro deck was one of the deck lists that was in the metagame. So, maybe they curse you with something, and then you're like, oh, I feel so bad that you... Maybe there's like if it's a aggro deck, as was mentioned, maybe it's something where there's like an aggro creature that swings in and it wishes up like a small curse that does some sideboardy effect. Mm-hmm. And there's sideboardy effects that really ruin you because you're an artifact deck. But you play this out and you sacrifice something, you kill the thing that can wishboard up curses and also blow up the curse.
I mean, it does something you need setup for it to work. It's only a 1 of, so it makes sense that you don't want it that often. But sometimes, hey, let's just throw it in there to absolutely go super explosive.
As I was just like literally kind of writing fan fiction for a standard metagame that doesn't exist, it does a good job of like making me imagine the texture of what things might look like.
Yeah.
And imagining the use and abuse cases that would lead to you being like, oh, I want this as a 1 of, because in certain contexts it really, really glows. But, if I have this in my opening hand, there's a certain amount of hemming and hawing that I'm going to do about how much is this opener going to chug along if I have this.
Yeah. This is a pretty cohesive deck. I mean, it paints that picture of like, I don't get all the exact pieces that I want. Like I don't, the Thief Guild Runner's not an artifact creature. I'd kind of want it to be an artifact creature, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which I think makes it more believable as a standard deck that I don't quite, the discard spell is 3 mana, which was kind of groan worthy for you. The pieces aren't exactly right, but you still imagine like, hey, it's all these themes from different sets that we're sort of cobbling together and making work.
Yeah, it's very synergistic in a way that I feel like the standard environments now don't necessarily have, but I don't find that too bad of a thing to do. I don't find being like, I'm going to deviate from how standards are in the current era by trying to make a thing that looks like it has a whole lot of cohesion to it to be a bad thing to do. I think it helps with the evocativeness of imagining this deck in a metagame, and it helps with making it feel more like a real deck to me.
Yeah.
It's weird, though, because by that argument, what I'm saying is that sometimes standard decks right now feel less like real decks than this does.
Yeah. A lot of the standard decks now are just really fundamental themes like card draw and removal mid-range. Like all out red or Gruul, prowess just like hit really hard. I guess there is like a tokeny deck brewing people were talking about where, Boros tokens or whatever. I know someone was bringing up in the Discord. So maybe you get glimpses of that here and there. And this would be an example of that, where you have kind of a cohesive theme that materialized over 5 different sets.
Artifact sacrifice mattering, I think, is the sort of theme that's generic enough that, unlike, for example, Offspring, it's a lot easier for artifact sacrifice matters to congeal into a critical mass to have a pretty cogent theme. So, like, for example, the bargain theme that exists in Death with the Dawn, that set might not be the most artifacty set. It might be that the limited environment has artifacts in red black for relays, and then there's something enchantmenty that we don't see that is overall in the other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's incidentally possible to just snowball into an artifact thing here without it being too wild of a thing to occur. It could be that the only artifacts that are really majorly in the Phyrexia set could be incubators, for example.
Yeah, you can imagine all that kind of stuff. How do you feel about these new mechanics in general? We've got plunder. Have you plundered? Plundering is sort of a condition you can meet. We've got relay tokens. We've got in spirit. Do we have anything else?
I believe those are mechanics. 3.
Yeah.
I guess arguably the extension of incubate to include a keyword counter.
Yeah. So how do we feel about plundered?
I don't know that the name fits with the effect to me, but I think I like it okay. I don't love the reminder text, but I do think the idea of what was that Wilds of Eldraine mechanic that cared about 2 or more permanents entering?
Yep.
That in conjunction with like an aristocracy X or more permanents leaving to get to this kind of entering and leaving matters. I care about moving my game pieces around. Seems like a pretty solid effect. It seems like you could do it in a lot of colors, and just because we see it in red here doesn't mean it couldn't, for example, be in green or in blue or wherever.
Yeah. That was Celebration, like just having 2 permanents enter, non-land permanents enter. Yeah. And this is 3 or more permanents. Oh, so there is a little subtle difference there where your land counts for plundered. Does not count for celebration. So that's actually a lot easier than I realized. Yeah. I was thinking this is sort of the difference between like the usual, hey, draw 2 matters theme in a set, and the Modern Horizons 3 draw 3, which was like extra hard for anybody but that deck to do. But yeah, if land counts, this is a little more achievable.
Yeah. If land counts, then just playing an on-curve thing and cracking the treasure and making your land drop gets you the 4/4. So this becomes pretty darn aggressive on rate. I'm actually more skeptical of it without a non-land stipulation.
I would say that I'm not a huge fan of plundered. I don't see a lot of potential in it. In the context of a challenge where you're making up 4 sets in a week, designing like 13 banger cards, I am not expecting more than that, but like I think it's an achievement to have put out all these cards in this quality. But yeah, plundered does not hit for me. I don't know. It kind of encourages like rewards treasure tokens, penalizes fun, expensive cards. You know, I don't know.
I think with non-land, it would hit for me. As is, that's like one of the few criticisms I have among the card pool, like at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if it was non-land, then I'd like it even less, maybe, because it's all about treasure tokens. It's all about trying to do kind of ETB, make a tiny thing for it. You know, I don't know.
I think that's fair. It's possible that it just shouldn't be on like too aggressive of stuff, and Thief Guild Runner is too aggressive a thing for it. So, like, for example, sometimes when they're doing landfall, there's a question of, because you can't really do landfall at instant speed, how do you keep the aggression down? Where Thief Guild Runner says, I'm just going to keep the aggression up. We're going to do a landfall-ish mechanic and really, really, really keep the aggression up.
All right.
So it might be that Thief Guild is a mistake and it's a not putting Plunder's best foot forward.
Yeah.
How do you feel about in Spirit?
All right, so in Spirit, we want to have a bunch of non-creature artifacts in the set. And if we do that, we have a lot of ability to insult them, a lot of ability to bring them to life. I guess it's another thing that just kind of rewards tokens. I don't know. Or if not tokens, like an altar style card where you have the altar of perfection here. A thing who, if it gets, I create a token and then I have a secondary artifact that I could leave or take, like something that I don't care too much about.
Yeah, this is really leaning into the incidental game piece style of design that has kind of become a thing with the prevalence of artifact tokens. But that's kind of meeting the brief, That's kind of implicitly in the instructions.
It is good. Like I said, it's a great fit for the kind of thing they were asked to build here. Do I love this mechanic overall? Not particularly, but this card has a home in this deck. If this was just like not a mechanic, but just some spelled out text, this would be like a really solid card and fun card, I think.
What artifact tokens could you animate with an Inspirit thing where you feel good for having Inspirited it?
I guess this Incubate is where the main one is, because it comes with the counters.
Yeah, and if you had a non-creature artifact that had keywords on it, like let's say for example in the limited environment, there was an artifact that was like 2 mana ETB draw a card artifact, the classic 2 mana ETB draw a card artifact that had lifelink and vigilance or something.
Yeah, just like text that doesn't do anything right away, and you just have to say like, why is that on there?
Yeah.
I was sort of thinking like an artifact that has flying and creatures you control have flying.
Okay, yeah, that could work.
Other creatures you control, yeah. That feels more like an enchantment to me, and that's maybe where I am a little stuck on how you make, first of all, 12 Inspirit cards and also 20 non-creature artifacts for a set.
I do kind of wish Inspirit said artifact or enchantment. That's like a slight wish.
Yeah. And that's where I'm like, this isn't totally believable as a standard mechanic to me, but I'm loving this pack overall.
I do think there's a really great thing you can animate with Inspirit, though. Howling Mine style effects where they deactivate when tapped.
Oh, deactivate when tapped. Very funny. Artifacts with untap abilities, we're bringing it back. And then relay tokens. I think relay tokens are the one I like the most. They just feel fun. Like, I'm going to build up a bunch of these and then draw a bunch of cards. I had to pay a big cost to get those tokens, which I'm writing off. I'm not thinking too hard about how hard it was to make 4 relay tokens, but I'm really happy when I cracked them all.
I feel like it also addresses a core issue with clues that makes them sometimes feel kind of unpleasant, and that the more clues you have, the worse they are. And that's true of drawing cards to an extent overall, but here, the draw a huge number of cards effect feels really satisfying. And I don't think that, for example, in a limited environment with relay cards, it would get too terribly much faster than clues, because a lot of clue limited environments, when they're pretty prevalently clues, they tend to be a bit of a grindhouse.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine this would have similar problems, but just they would just look different. I don't know.
I feel like it would be, you have like a setup-y phase in your limited environment where you're like, I'm going to get a fair few relay tokens. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm out of gas. I'm going to draw 5 cards with relay tokens.
Yeah. We ran into this a lot with Castmire, the custom set that Beacon was working on for a while, where my opponent would have 4 clues stacked up and it's like, all right, I have a chance here, but I have to kill them in the next turn or 2.
Yeah.
With relay tokens, that problem doesn't exist. The opponent pays 3 mana once, and now they are right ahead, and they have every land they could need for the rest of the game and all that kind of stuff. So it maybe makes them slightly worse and like a 1-for-1, early on, but just like absolutely crushing to play against in a limited game.
The mid game definitely becomes much more like, the relay tokens are super strong, but it doesn't, like, if it's more of a hurry up and kill me sort of thing, where you could be dead but not dead in Innistrad Midnight Hunt limited.
I guess maybe relay tokens are a little cheap. Are they cheaper to make than clues? No, they probably have to be basically the same cost to make.
Yeah, they're probably basically the same cost, if not a hair's breadth more expensive.
Yeah. So they're not necessarily better to sacrifice or anything like that. They seem well positioned in this deck. They fit the ecosystem of this deck in a nice way. Yeah. But yeah, I'm loving these cards overall. Like the deck feels like it's got a theme that makes sense. It's cobbled together from a bunch of different sets, but they work together in a cool way that's outside of how they work within their individual sets, and I absolutely love that. It feels very standardy.
I think that this very effectively meets the brief. I think it's got a very coherent game plan. I feel intimidated by the idea of facing off against this deck, which I think is a thing that you kind of want out of the Jundi deck. I feel like the Jundi deck is, for the people who enjoy playing Jund, it's the hero, but it has like villainous properties to it in terms of doing a lot of the like mean and creepy parts of black and red and playing a lot of the spookier green creatures. And I feel like this kludges together that very Jundi vibe.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's it for our kind of read of these cards. By the time this episode goes up, the winner will already be announced. So head over to the Discord or head over to the website to see who that winner was. We don't know yet. This is our first look at these cards. We've got some other judges who are reading these cards right now and getting their thoughts down. I don't know. This is always a great process. Every year, the finals, it's like only a week, which is a crazy short amount of time to come up with the amount of stuff we make people come up with. They always deliver, and it's always great to see these finals, and I'm always so excited. And this year was no different. This league was absolutely great. That's about it for our podcast for the week as well. Hop on the Discord. That's where all the action is. I think another You Make the Pack might actually be up and running. So go ahead and check that out, making one card at a time. If you don't feel like you want to try to make 13 cards that are all cohere at the same time, you just want to make one, here's your chance. You Make the Pack is a great way to jump in and participate with the community. You can always look for our monthly design challenge as well. Marcus, thanks for coming on. It's been a while since we had you.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Anything you want to tell people about? Anything you want to recommend?
I've been really enjoying Once Upon a Galaxy. I think its Kickstarter is still up. It's a really great game. The indomitable Alexis Jansen is working on it, and love her stuff in general. Also, we're slowly creeping up on Mockstober here. We're a little over a month out from it.
Oh, yeah.
Anybody wanting to weigh in on the Discord on any sort of goals for what they'd like to see out of Mockstober, we're kind of in that tentative pre-planning phase about what the calendar's going to look like, stuff like that. You know, just give any sort of feedback on what you'd like to see out of that.
Yeah, speaking of making a whole lot of cards, a card a day for a month.
Yeah, bit of a breakneck pace.
Yeah. I don't know, sometimes you just got to get the card out for the day, or people do like 5 on a weekend day or something like that.
Yeah, and it's totally fine to fall behind and catch up. And anybody who, you know, does any sort of creative work, sometimes you just aren't able to perform when you'd like to perform along that stuff. Yeah. Everyone's always very chill about it. It's not the worst thing in the world to fall behind. I know last year I fell behind and had to catch up, and it's just a thing that happens.
Yeah. Alrighty, so look forward to Mockstober. I hadn't heard the wind howling yet. The stomps of the headless horseman hadn't gone by my house to warn me. But I'll look forward to that too. If you need to reach either of us, the Discord's the way to do it. I'm at Tim F. Riley there, and you're Mark Confidant there. Mm-hmm. And thanks everybody for listening.
And remember, Duskmorn is just a Castmire fan set.